next one up, we have Kate, and you can seamlessly go after her. I think maybe we'll use that as an intro slide, or do you prefer the other bit?
Whatever you want to put up is fine.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining,
Thank
Kate.
you.
I know that you have a ton of notes, and it's a pretty seamless, I think, like follow-up from this.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And I don't have slides because I'm the political person, and Amanda is the data person and science person. So. But I think there's a lot of relationship between what Amanda said and what I'm going to say. Just quickly, you have my bio, but Kate Gordon just came off 2 years as senior advisor to Secretary Granholm at the Department of Energy. Before that, I was Governor Newsom's senior climate advisor, and have spent sort of 20 years thinking about how to translate some of these major challenges and system change requirements into tactical policy and opportunities. So Amanda covered a lot of sort of, of the basics. I just want to say a couple things sort of, why is this so critical? Getting to that goal, there's so many goals out there. There's the pledge, there's the goals, there's all of these people. The U.S. has committed to 50% economy-wide emission reductions by 2030. There's goals all over the place. Why is it so critical to reach them? We've already had $23 billion climate disasters just in the United States this year in 2023. We set extreme heat records this year, as I think folks know, in the U.S., in the EU, in China, all over the world. These are extreme heat events are the deadliest of all climate disasters. This has been an incredibly deadly year when it comes to climate change, and every region of the world has some version of this, whether floods, sea level rise, wildfires, extreme heat. So this is being felt very deeply, increasingly deeply around the world by everybody, but particularly the global south. So what do we do about it? I mean, I think both Amanda and I are focusing a little bit more on mitigation, which is the reduction of emissions, than on adaptation, which is dealing with the emissions already in the atmosphere. But what we do about it has to be a balance of those two things. We've got to reduce emissions from our current economic activity across the world and land activity and industrial activity. We've also got to build more resilience and to adapt to what's already in the atmosphere. We have, been emitting since the Industrial Revolution. Those emissions are in our atmosphere, and they are leading to those disasters. And so we've really got to do both. There has been far less attention in the policy world on adaptation and resilience. It is a serious lack of focus. And so I'll also be focusing more on mitigation, but I just wanted to note that. So I'm going to very oversimplify what we need to do on mitigation. Who here's read Omnivore's Dilemma, the Michael Pollan book? So the sort of baseline of that book is eat food, not too much, mostly plants. In the energy space, use electricity, not too much, mostly renewable. It's basically what we need to do. And then there's a bunch of stuff, getting stuff out of the atmosphere. But it's pretty simple, but it's not. This is a massive economy-wide effort. Our economy worldwide is 85% dependent on fossil fuels right now. Every single sector. Think about your lives, think about plastic, think about vehicles, think about land use, think about agriculture. So this transformation is massive and significant. The great news is this administration has done more than any administration to date, and in fact any administration in the world, to address these issues. And I'll just say a couple words about what the Biden-Harris administration has done through three major bills: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, which focuses on semiconductor manufacturing, and of course the Inflation Reduction Act. Those three together are a significant investment in moving us away from dependence on fossil fuels, away from a heavy emitting industrial economy. It essentially is a clean energy industrial strategy that this administration has put forward that relies on building up domestic industry and supply chains to be able to address these problems that Amanda and I both laid out. Use electricity. What have we done? Those bills together, a massive investment in new transmission and transmission resilience, in electric vehicles and EV infrastructure and charging, in electrification generally, particularly industrial decarbonization. Not too much. The Weatherization Assistance Program for individuals to be able to weatherize their homes, particularly low-income individuals. Rebates in the Inflation Reduction Act for people doing decarbonization. And again, industrial decarb to build out more efficiency. Efficiency is an under-discussed part of this world. It's because it's not that sexy. It's not that fun to look at. Weatherization project versus looking at a giant solar array. It is more important probably than any piece of this strategy, because using less in using less and reusing and repurposing is probably the most important thing we can do as an industrial economy. And mostly renewable, the Inflation Reduction Act doubles down with tax credits that are actually uncapped and don't have a sunset for production and investment in renewable energy projects. That is a massive infusion of private sector money into these projects. So what we like to say when I was in the administration is this transformation is government enabled, private sector led. The private sector will have to come in because the cost of this transformation is enormous. These bills also tackle some of the hard stuff. You heard about carbon removal, that both land and technology based, I won't say more about that. Hard to decarbonize sectors, things like sustainable aviation fuel are a big part of this package. And then a focus on new and emerging technologies, a place where government comes in as a first mover, hydrogen, small modular reactors for nuclear, critical mineral production, which is going to be a big piece of this puzzle. I'm going to spend my last minute or so talking about some challenges. You heard some of them, but I'm going to dig in on a couple of others. Technology change is not enough. You'll hear a lot about technology and the role of technology. Transformation of the economy is not just a technology challenge. Talking about the energy technology transformation does not adequately capture a lot of things, including land use change. We cannot just replace every ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle, with an electric vehicle. If we continue sprawling development, we will have just as big of a carbon impact from paving over all of that land as we do from driving internal combustion engines. Land use change, really critical, not adequately captured. Carbon removal, getting that carbon out of the atmosphere, not adequately covered usually by mitigation. We need to bring people, places, and politics along if we're actually going to achieve this transformation. And that means thinking about those energy communities that were successful in the fossil economy and are now transitioning. That means those communities left behind in the industrial economy, those low-income communities, those communities that are in areas with high industrial pollution. For the administration, that's the Justice 40 communities. You may have heard about that initiative, and there's also a big initiative around energy communities. That means a focus on politics, and Rich Powell's boss, Jay Faison, yesterday we were at a meeting and talked about resilience and adaptation is actually a fairly bipartisan conversation. Moving more of our focus to adaptation and resilience is a way to start thinking about the politics. So is creating broadly shared prosperity in the places that are transforming. It is not enough to have a Sudoku chart of emissions coming down. You actually have to do the work on the ground. One more minute. The last one, and we need to do it, we need to save the earth without destroying the earth. We need to do this in a way that's far more focused on ecosystems and biodiversity than we did in the last industrial revolution. Last thing I just want to say, because I don't think it's getting enough attention, which is the geopolitics are not getting enough attention. Increased war and conflict. Climate change increases war and conflict because of scarcity. War and conflict is very carbon intensive as an activity. And war and conflict also drives changes in our oil system, which is our current system, and leads to things like the Russia-Ukraine conflict, leading to Exxon buying shale in the United States because the US is now a major exporter again of shale gas. These are you cannot put that aside. These are huge drivers, and they have to be considered as we're thinking about these changes this transformation does not happen in a vacuum. So that's why we need all of you to figure it out. So I will leave you with that, and I think we can take a couple minutes of questions, maybe two? A minute of questions.
All right, well, thank you.
That was a lot.
Okay, one at least.
We both went.
Anyone? I'm sure that there's a couple, but maybe we can start with one.
Thank you. Very interesting. I would like to know if you have any opinions or information about the governance of climate change at a global level. What is China going to do? Brazil is going to do? India going to do?
Just really briefly, that's a huge topic. But really briefly, we can't do this without a global governance. Carbon emissions we have all these artificial goals around as if emissions were confined to their geographic location or company. They are not. So we ultimately have got to have global governments. I now am not in the government, so I can be political. My single biggest concern about the next election is that we will get out of a bunch of the global compacts that we're already in because they're critical. Ultimately, my feeling is the more climate disasters, the more people feel them very personally, the more they destabilize regions, the more we will have impetus toward global compacts, but I think that will take longer than we would like it to. All right, we're going to get cut off. We have a very strict